Hi everyone. My name is Claire Hartwell. I'm 38 years old, and I want you to know something before I say anything else. I am not a dramatic person. I'm not someone who posts her personal life online, or cries in public or falls apart in front of people. I'm the kind of woman who keeps a backup copy of every important document in a fireproof box under her bed. I'm the kind of woman who reads the fine print on every contract she signs, every lease she renews, every agreement she enters. I built a business from scratch, from my kitchen table, with $4,000 in savings and a second-hand laptop, and I have kept it running for 12 years through recessions and pandemics and every other thing the world threw at it. And I am the kind of woman who, when her husband of 11 years decided to blow up their entire life for a coworker named Vanessa, sat very, very still and waited. Because here's what Daniel never understood about me, even after all that time together. I don't react first. I prepare first. Reacting is for people who haven't thought it through yet. And I had thought this through very, very carefully. So if you're expecting a story about a woman screaming and throwing things and begging her husband to come back, this is not that story. I want you to know that right up front, this is the story of what 4 months of silence can build. And I still can't fully believe how completely it destroyed him. Stay with me, because the part at the end of this, the part in that mediator's office, is something I still think about, late at night, when I'm sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, and the house is quiet, and I want you to hear all of it. Part 1. The marriage I thought I had. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand what I believed my life was before I found out what it actually was. Daniel and I met when I was 26, he was 29. He was funny and warm and easy to be around, which was new for me because I had spent most of my 20s being not easy to be around. I was driven to the point of exhaustion. I had started my business at 23. I was used to being the person in the room who was working hardest and sleeping least, and I had kind of accepted that romance was going to be a low priority until I got the company stable. And then Daniel walked into a friend's dinner party and spent 2 hours asking me questions about what I was building, and actually listening to the answers, and I thought, oh, this is new. Hartwell Creative, my company, is a boutique branding and design consultancy. In the beginning it was just me and a laptop and a client list I built by being very good at my job and very bad at work-life balance. Over the years I added a team. By the time Daniel and I got married, I had 3 full-time employees and a revenue base that was modest but real. By the time all of this happened, the divorce, the mediation, all of it, the company was the most valuable thing I owned, and I had built every dollar of it myself. Daniel supported that, or he performed supporting it, which I now understand is a different thing. He proposed on a regular Tuesday night in our apartment, in the kitchen, while I was still in my work clothes and had probably answered 3 emails in the last 20 minutes. He got down on one knee on our tile floor, and I said yes before he could get the whole sentence out. That's a true thing that happened, and I'm allowed to miss it even while also knowing what I know now. Human hearts are complicated like that. We got married 2 years later. Small wedding, exactly what I wanted. His family, my sister, my 2 best friends, 40 people who mattered to us. It was a good day. It really was. I'm not going to let what came after steal that day from me. For a while, a few years, we were genuinely a team. He had his career in corporate project management. I had the business. We bought a house. We disagreed about paint colors and agreed about almost everything else. It was a normal, functional, warm marriage, and I was happy in it. Then we decided we wanted a family. I'm going to be careful here because this section involves my daughter Mia. She is 6 years old, the greatest thing in my life, and she doesn't need to be part of this story in a way that follows her around, so I'll be brief. We tried to have a biological child for about 2 years. When that didn't happen, we made the decision to adopt. It was deliberate and intentional, and one of the most meaningful conversations Daniel and I ever had. What kind of parents we wanted to be, what kind of family we were building, what it meant to choose a child the way we were choosing to do. We went through the process, we waited, and then Mia came home. She was 7 months old. She had enormous brown eyes and very strong opinions about her pacifier, and she looked at me for the first time, and I felt my entire chest open up, in a way I had never felt before in my life. I sat in that hospital room holding her, and I cried, and I called my sister from the parking lot, and cried again, and I was, without question, the happiest I had ever been. What I did not know while I was sitting in that room, while I was crying with joy, while I was holding my daughter for the first time, was that Daniel was conducting an ongoing affair with his coworker Vanessa, that the affair had already been going on for a while, that he had already sent her messages about this day, messages I would find in his email archive, years later, that I will never be able to unread, but I didn't know any of that yet, so I held my daughter and I was happy. Porp 2, the slow erosion. Here's the tricky thing about a life that's slowly going wrong. It doesn't feel dramatic, it just feels like a low hum, like a fluorescent light that's slightly off its frequency. You don't always notice it consciously. You just feel vaguely tired all the time and you can't pinpoint exactly why. For the first couple of years after Mia came home, I told myself the distance I was feeling from Daniel was just the adjustment period. A new baby changes everything, changes your rhythms, your priorities, the way you talk to each other. That's normal. That's what everyone says. I believed it because I wanted to, but the distance didn't close. He started working later, coming home distracted, going quiet in the way that men sometimes go quiet, when they're somewhere else in their head. His phone was always face down when he was home. Not always, just often enough that I noticed. He started taking calls outside. He went for walks after dinner that lasted 45 minutes. Thursdays became late nights, then Fridays, then certain Saturdays were described as team offsites or project crunch periods that I never quite saw confirmed anywhere official. And when I asked, not in an accusing way, just in a curious, I'm your wife way, he had answers. Calm, reasonable, detailed answers. That was Daniel's real skill, I think. Not the manipulation itself, but the seamlessness of it. The way his explanations never had a single gap you could press your finger into. If I said something felt off, he would look at me with this patient, slightly concerned expression and say, Claire, you've been under so much stress. You're working so hard. Not everything is a problem that needs solving. And somehow that always made me feel like I was the one being unreasonable. Like my instincts were the problem, not the behavior I was responding to. I want to stop here and say something directly, because I think a lot of people, a lot of women, will recognize what I'm describing. When someone close to you consistently reframes your perception as the problem, over and over, it does something to you over time. It makes you quiet your own voice. It makes you second-guess the very instincts that are trying to protect you. I did not understand that what was happening had a name. Is emotional gaslighting, until my therapist named it for me later. But I want to name it here, so you recognize it if you're living in it. One name started showing up in Daniel's conversation more than any other: Vanessa. His coworker. She organized team lunches. She was sharp. She had interesting opinions. Daniel mentioned her the way you mention someone you're thinking about a lot. And then one day, I couldn't tell you exactly when, the name stopped coming up entirely. Edited out, silence where there had been a name. If you've ever had that happen, you know, the silence around a name is louder than the name itself. The absence is the signal. I noticed it. I tucked it somewhere in the back of my mind. I told myself I was being paranoid. I focused on my business. I focused on Mia. I let the low hum keep humming. For 2 years I did that. And then Daniel sat down across from me at the kitchen table on a Wednesday night in October, and told me he wasn't happy. He was very calm, very considered. He said he felt we'd grown apart. He said he cared about me deeply but wasn't in love with me anymore. He thought a separation might be the healthy choice for both of us. He had clearly rehearsed this. The tone was exactly right, sad but not guilty, concerned but not uncertain. He'd practiced in a mirror or with someone and it showed. I looked at him across that table and something strange and cold settled into me. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I said very quietly, "Is there someone else?" He paused. I need you to understand this pause. It was not long. Half a second, maybe less. But I had been married to this man for 11 years and I knew the half-second pause. I had never had reason to look for it before, but I saw it. No, he said. This is about us. I nodded. I said I needed some time. He said of course. He moved into the guest room that night. 48 hours later, my phone buzzed with a text from his number. I looked at it. It said, "She took it better than I expected. Give me a week." And then 30 seconds later, another buzz. "Sorry, wrong number. Wrong number." To his wife's phone, from his phone, about his wife. I put my phone face down on my desk. I sat there for a minute. And then I opened my laptop, went into the business email server, and started to look. Part 3. Emails. Let me explain the server situation. Because it matters. Heartwell Creative runs on a private email server that my IT contractor set up for us years ago. It's not a household name provider, it's a custom domain, and the administrative portal has always been managed by a small number of people. I access it, my office manager accesses it, and years ago, maybe 5 or 6, Daniel had asked me to add him as an administrative user so he could help coordinate a vendor payment while I was on a client trip and unreachable. I added him. It was a practical decision. I forgot about it. It never occurred to me to remove the access because I never imagined he would use it for anything except the reason he'd asked. I was wrong about that. That first night, sitting at my desk with the bedroom door closed and the house quiet, I started going through the administrative logs. And then I found the outbound email record. He had been using ghost address, a send routing that ran through my server but showed an unfamiliar display name, to conduct his communications with Vanessa for years. Most of the emails were personal, long, ongoing conversations about their relationship, about their feelings for each other, about plans they were making, about me. I will tell you plainly, reading those emails about myself was one of the most disorienting experiences of my life. There is something uniquely surreal about reading someone else's detailed, unguarded assessment of you. Your personality, your habits, the ways they find you lacking, the comparisons they make between you and the person they've replaced you with. It reads like a document written about a stranger, and then you realize the stranger is you. And then you feel nothing. And then you feel everything. And then you feel nothing again. I let myself do that for a while, then I kept reading. Between the personal exchanges were receipts, hotel reservations, restaurant reservations at places I had never been to with my husband, a set of flight bookings for a long weekend in Charleston that I had been told. I specifically remember this, was a project team retreat. And then I found the financial records. Several years earlier, Daniel had added himself as an authorized user on one of my business credit accounts. For emergencies, he'd explained. For when he needed to cover something business-related on my behalf. I had agreed because that's what you do with someone you trust. Over the course of what turned out to be approximately 3 years, he had charged that account for $11,400 in personal expenses. Every one of those charges was documentable. Every one of them was traceable back to this relationship. He had funded his affair using my business. I want to pause here for a second because I need you to understand what that feels like beyond the financial number. He had used the thing I built. The company I started at 23. That I had worked 7 days a week for years to grow. That I had built before I even knew his name. To fund a secret life. The money I earned went to hotel rooms with another woman. My business accounts were in the receipts. My name was in the routing address. He had taken the most important thing I'd ever built and made it complicit in something I didn't even know was happening. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark. I thought about what to do, and then I made a choice I'm very proud of. I did not confront him. Not that night. Not the next week. Not for 4 months. Because I'd realized something sitting there in the dark. What I had wasn't just a personal wound. What I had was a legal case, and I needed to talk to a lawyer before I spent a single card in my hand. Here's the thing I want you to hear, especially if you're in something hard right now. Your pain has value. But only if you protect it. Only if you hold it carefully until you understand what it's worth. A confrontation in the heat of the moment might feel like relief. But it tips your hand. It gives the other person time to prepare a story. It loses you the element of surprise. I had the element of surprise. I was going to keep it. Part 4. Rachel Odom. I called my business attorney the next morning. Her name is Priya. And she has worked with Heartwell Creative for 6 years. I told her I needed a referral for a family law attorney, the best she knew. And I needed complete discretion. She texted me a name before I even finished my coffee. Rachel Odom was 52 years old and had been practicing family law for 24 years. She had a corner office in a building downtown, and an administrative assistant who had clearly worked with her long enough to match her energy, which was efficient, precise, and radiating a very specific type of controlled menace that I found immediately reassuring. I told Rachel everything. I told her about the marriage, the adoption, the slow erosion, the text message from Daniel's phone, and then the emails. I walked her through everything I'd found and how I'd found it. I had brought a printed summary and a USB drive with screenshots, time-stamped and organized. She read everything. She asked a few precise questions, Then she asked me about the business. I told her premarital asset, founded 3 years before we married, separate business accounts the entire time. He was never on the payroll, never a listed owner or partner, never had any formal stake. She took her glasses off and held them loosely in one hand and looked at me. He's going to claim that the business grew during the marriage, she said. He's going to argue that his income subsidized your household, which freed you to invest in the company, which means he has a claim on its growth. That's a real argument in this state. It doesn't always win, but it's real. I nodded. I had suspected this, but she said, putting her glasses back on, he used your server to conduct the affair. He used your business credit account to fund it. For 3 years. To the tune of over $11,000. She tapped the printed summary. That changes the nature of the conversation significantly. I said I was glad to hear that. What I want to do, she said, is let him file. Let him come to mediation confident. Let him make his argument about marital assets and the business and everything else he thinks he's entitled to. She paused. And then we present what you have. I asked her what that would look like. She smiled. It will look like a countersuit for financial misconduct during the marriage. Misuse of your business infrastructure, unauthorized use of your business credit, civil damages. She paused again, and the timeline is going to be important. When did the affair start? I pulled up the first email I'd found and turned my phone toward her. She looked at it, then she looked up at me. This predates the adoption, she said. By about 3 months, I said. Something shifted in her expression. Not surprise, something more like recognition, the particular look of a person who has just understood the full shape of something. Okay, she said quietly. Leave this with me. Part 5. 4 moves of nothing. Here is the hardest part of this entire story to explain, because I think people hear she waited 4 months, and imagine something passive, something quiet, something peaceful. It was not peaceful, not even a little. Daniel and I were still living in the same house. He was in the guest room. We were civil, genuinely, carefully civil, because we both wanted Mia to experience as little disruption as possible while we figured things out. We co-parented remarkably well for 2 people in the middle of what we were in the middle of. We took turns with bath time and school drop-offs and dinosaur bedtime stories. We said please and thank you in the kitchen. We were honestly better at being roommates than we had been at being married, which is its own particular kind of sad. And through all of it, I knew what I knew, and he didn't know that I knew. There were nights that were very hard, nights when I would be lying in bed in the dark, and the whole weight of it would sit on my chest, and I would want to walk down the hall and say every single thing I knew. Loudly, without any strategic calculation at all. Just say it, like a human person with feelings would do. I didn't. I would think about Mia. I would think about Rachel's face when she'd said, "Leave this with me." And then I would breathe, and I would open my notes app on my phone and write down something I was feeling. Not to share, just to get it out of my chest and somewhere external. And then I would close my eyes and try to sleep. I started therapy during this period. I want to mention that, because I think the narrative of the strong silent woman who handles everything alone is appealing but slightly dishonest. I was not alone. I had Rachel, who was building the legal case. I had my therapist, Dr. Ng, who gave me somewhere to put all the things I couldn't say out loud at home. I had my sister, who knew something was wrong even before I told her anything specific, because sisters know. And I had my 2 closest friends, who are both the kind of people who do not panic and do not give advice until you ask, and I love them for exactly that. And I had my work. I want to say that clearly, because Heartwell Creative was not just a legal asset in this situation. It was a lifeline. Going into my office every morning and doing the work. Doing it well, doing it better than I'd ever done it because I needed somewhere to put all that energy, was what kept me sane. Meanwhile, Rachel was building. She had the IT documentation from my server contractor, who had authenticated the email routing and produced a complete access log showing Daniel's activity going back 3 years. She had the business credit statements. She had the email archive, authenticated and preserved. She had a financial summary showing the total value of the unauthorized charges. And she had the timeline. The affair had started based on the earliest email we could document, 5 years before the divorce filing, which meant it had started approximately 3 months before Mia came home. I want to be very careful about how I discuss this part, for Mia's sake, but I will say this, that timing created a legal and narrative context that was deeply significant. It spoke to the nature of the marital relationship during a critical and foundational moment in our family, and it created a picture of a man who had made a particular set of choices during a period when he was also choosing to become a father. Rachel told me it would matter. I believed her. I also found out, through Rachel's standard background process, that Greg, Vanessa's husband, had received an anonymous tip some weeks earlier and had quietly retained his own attorney. She mentioned this to me almost as a footnote. I sat with it for a moment. I told her I had nothing to do with that. She said she knew. But you're not unhappy about it, she said. I didn't answer. She moved on. Daniel filed in late February. He had his own attorney, a man named Fletcher, who projected the kind of confidence that comes from usually being the smartest person in the room. The mediation was scheduled for a Tuesday in March. I circled it on my calendar in my kitchen at home, and went and got Mia ready for preschool, and made her breakfast, and told her she was my favorite person in the whole world, and she told me I was also her favorite person, but that Gerald the dinosaur was tied for first, which I found completely fair. Part 6. The mediation. I wore a dark gray blazer and flat shoes, and I drove myself downtown. And I got there 7 minutes early, and I sat in Rachel's car in the parking garage, while she walked me through what was going to happen. He's going to come in confident, she said. Fletcher is good. He'll be organized and calm, and they're going to lay out a settlement structure that sounds reasonable on the surface. They want the house, 50% of liquid marital assets, and some portion of the business. They have a valuation they've done. I asked her how they valued it. She told me. It was high, which meant their claim would be high. When do we respond? I asked. Let them finish, she said. Every word. We went inside. The mediator's office was exactly what you'd expect. A round table, neutral furniture, water pitchers, the kind of room designed to make conflict feel manageable. Daniel was already there when we arrived. He was in a dark suit. He looked rested. He looked like a man who had done the math and liked the numbers. He looked at me and gave me the same expression he'd been giving me for months. Sympathetic, slightly apologetic, the face of a man who is very sorry that things turned out this way. I looked back at him with what I hoped was a neutral expression. I sat down. Fletcher presented their case for about 25 minutes. It was well organized. He made the business argument, the indirect support claim, the household income subsidy, the growth during marriage, and it was genuinely a solid argument. I could see why Daniel had hired him. I looked at my hands while Fletcher talked. I breathed slowly. I let every word land without letting any of it reach my face. Rachel waited until he was fully done. She thanked him for the thorough overview. She said she'd asked us a few preliminary matters before the discussion of asset division. Then she opened her folder. She placed the first document on the table, the server access log. She placed the second, the email routing documentation. She placed the third, the business credit statement with each unauthorized charge highlighted. Mr. Hartwell maintained unauthorized access to Mrs. Hartwell's business email server infrastructure, Rachel said, over a period of approximately 3 years. During this same period, he made $11,423 in personal charges to a business credit account, to which he had been granted limited emergency access. We have full documentation of both. Fletcher's pen stopped moving. These charges were made in connection with a personal relationship conducted by Mr. Hartwell during the marriage, Rachel continued. The email documentation, which has been authenticated by the server administrator, establishes both the nature of the charges and the timeline of the relationship. She placed the fourth document on the table. The timeline. The relationship began, she said, approximately 3 months prior to the Hartwells' adoption of their daughter. Daniel's face. I am going to try to describe it accurately, because I want you to understand that this was not a dramatic movie moment. He didn't make a sound. He didn't move. His expression just changed, like a slow edit. The easy confidence drained out of it, and what was underneath was something much smaller. Fletcher asked for a break. We took a 30-minute recess. Rachel and I went to the hallway. She poured herself a coffee from the side table. I drank some water. I looked out the window at the street below. People walking with coffee cups. A delivery truck. Normal Monday morning things. I thought about the first time Mia called me Mama. She was 13 months old. We were in the kitchen. She was in her high chair, and she looked right at me and said it clearly. I remembered exactly what I did. I burst into tears immediately, right in front of her, and she stared at me with enormous alarmed eyes like she was reconsidering the whole thing. I breathed. I stayed steady. When we went back in, Fletcher was different, still professional, still careful, but working noticeably harder. He said his client would like to explore a settlement framework. Rachel said she assumed so. She also mentioned at that point the countersuit, which had been filed that same morning, financial misconduct during the marriage, civil damages, the full request. Fletcher's expression did a very specific thing that I appreciated enormously. We spent the next 2 hours negotiating. Port 7. What the table looked like when we left, I can't share every detail of the settlement. Some of it's protected, and also it's mine and I get to keep it. But here's what I can tell you. Hartwell Creative stayed mine, 100%, no buyout, no offset, no claim of any kind. The combination of the documentation crushed and the countersuit created a situation where pursuing that argument further would have exposed Daniel to significantly more legal liability than the claim was worth. Fletcher advised against it. Daniel, for maybe the first time in a long time, listened to someone's advice. The house was mine. The down payment had come from my business accounts, and the mortgage had been primarily covered by my income. When that financial picture was laid alongside everything else, there wasn't much room to argue. Daniel would pay support. I won't say how much. I'll say it was more than he expected when he walked into that room. The countersuit was settled privately, with a structured payment arrangement. Rachel had been strategic about that too, using it as negotiating leverage rather than pushing it to trial, which would have been more expensive and less certain for everyone. And then there was Greg, Vanessa's husband. His own case was moving on its own track, entirely separate from ours, but it created its own pressure on Vanessa's situation. I heard later, Rachel, who heard through channels, that their household had fractured under the weight of all of it, that Vanessa had left the company, that the relationship with Daniel, under the full light of legal proceedings and professional fallout and the pressure of Greg's case, had not survived intact. I don't feel guilty about that. I've spent some time checking whether I should, and I keep arriving at the same place. I did nothing to cause it, except tell the truth, and I'm not responsible for the structural integrity of a relationship built on someone else's lies. Part 8. What actually held me. People assume the mediation was the turning point, that walking out of that room with the outcome I got was where I started to feel better. And I want to be honest with you. It wasn't. The mediation was satisfying in the specific and narrow sense that justice is satisfying. The way a math problem is satisfying when the numbers come out clean. It was resolution, not healing. Those are different things. What actually started to heal me was about a month later. It was a Tuesday night, and Mia and I were eating grilled cheese at the kitchen table. My kitchen table, the one he proposed at, the one where he told me he was leaving. And she was telling me about a dinosaur she had named Gerald, who was best friends with a small rock named Dennis. The friendship was complicated, she explained, because Gerald was very loud and Dennis was not a talker, but they made it work because they liked the same things. When I asked what things, she thought about it very seriously and said, bugs, and staying still. I laughed. Not a polite laugh, a real one, the kind that ambushes you. And she laughed because I was laughing, and then I was crying a little because I was laughing so hard. And she looked at me and patted my hand and said, "It's okay, Mama. Gerald is very funny." That's when I started to feel better. Not the papers. Not the countersuit. Not Fletcher's face when Rachel slid that third document across the table. A 6-year-old and a dinosaur named Gerald and grilled cheese on a Tuesday. I want that to be part of the record. Part 9. What I want you to take from this: I've thought a lot about why I finally decided to share this story. It's not really my nature to do this, but the more I've sat with it, the more I keep thinking about all the women. And it's not only women, but I'm going to speak to women's side right now, who are living in a version of what I was living in. That low-frequency hum. That feeling that something is wrong that you can't quite name. That pattern of having your own instincts quietly redirected back at you until you stop trusting them. And I want to say this directly. Your instincts are not the problem. They have never been the problem. They are trying to tell you something and you should listen. I also want to say this. For anyone who is in the middle of something and feeling the urge to blow everything up in one moment of confrontation, I understand that urge completely. I lived with it for 4 months. It is powerful, and it is legitimate, and your feelings are real. And sometimes, not always but sometimes, the most effective thing you can do with that energy is to set it aside for now. Save it. Redirect it. Pour it into preparation instead of confrontation. Because when you are prepared, when you walk into the room holding everything the other person doesn't know you have, the balance of power is completely different than when you walk in holding only your feelings. Daniel walked into that mediation room, thinking he had already won. He had done the math. He had hired the attorney. He had a settlement structure he believed in. He sat down across from me, looking like a man who felt a little sorry for me, and was trying to be decent about it, and he thought he knew exactly what was about to happen. He did not know what I had spent 4 months building. He did not know about the server logs. He did not know about the countersuit. He did not know what Rachel had in that folder, or that she was going to lay it on the table, piece by piece, like she was setting a very deliberate kind of table. He forgot that I had his emails. He forgot that I am a woman who reads the fine print. And I think about those two things together. I had his emails, and I read the fine print. And I think those are actually the same thing. Paying attention. Doing the unglamorous, careful work of knowing exactly what you're dealing with before you make your move. If you're out there right now sitting with something heavy, something you don't know how to handle yet, or something you're still gathering the courage to face, I hope this story helps in some small way, not as a blueprint, because everyone's situation is different, but as a reminder that you are more capable than the person who underestimated you gives you credit for, and that the quiet is not defeat. Sometimes the quiet is exactly where your power lives. Epilogue. 6 moves later, Heartwell Creative just signed the largest contract in its 12-year history, a 3-year brand partnership with a regional healthcare network. I have 4 full-time employees now, and a freelance roster I love working with. And I'm paying myself better than I ever have. I built that, every dollar of it. Mia started 1st grade last month. She has a best friend named Olivia, and she still sleeps with Gerald the dinosaur, and she has very strong opinions about which bowls her cereal goes in, and she is the loudest, most joyful person I know, and I am grateful for her every single day. Daniel has an apartment across town. He sees Mia on the agreed schedule. He is polite and quiet, and I think he is not doing well, and I've arrived at a place where I'm not glad about that, and I'm not sad about it either. He is not my problem anymore. He is a person who made choices and is living inside them, same as everyone. From what I understand, Vanessa has left the company and the city. I don't know where she is. I genuinely don't think about it much. Greg, her ex-husband, apparently moved back closer to his own family. I hope he's okay. I never met him, but I know what it's like to be the person who didn't know. And I have a lot of compassion for that. As for me, I sleep in the middle of my bed now, which is something I didn't realize I'd always wanted until I had it. I have tea every night at the kitchen table, after Mia goes to sleep, and I airs emails, and sometimes I just sit there in the quiet and I don't fill it with anything. And that feels like the right thing. My fireproof box under the bed has fresh documents in it. My backup copies are current. My fine print is read. I still have hard nights sometimes. I still reach for my phone to tell Daniel something funny, Mia said, and then remember. And that still stings for just a second, in the way that old bruises do when you press them unexpectedly. I think that might be true for a while longer. That's okay. I'm not in a hurry to not feel things. But I get up every morning in my house, with my daughter, doing work I care about, and I know, with complete certainty, that I made the right choices. Not just the legal choices. The choice to stay quiet while I needed to. The choice to trust Rachel. The choice to trust myself. The choice to know the difference between reacting and preparing. He thought he had already won. He forgot I had his emails. Thank you so much for listening to this. If this story resonated with you, if you saw yourself in any part of it, I would genuinely love to hear from you in the comments. You don't have to share anything personal. Just knowing someone else has been through something like this, and that this helped even a little, means something to me. I'll see you next time.